Continues that very crucial hearing that is underway at the Supreme Court of India. Tomorrow is Ganesh Chaturthi, and there are orders that Ganesh Chaturthi celebrations should be allowed at the Eidgah Maidan. Now, this Maidan has a contested legacy. The Waqf Board says that the property belongs to them for over 100 years. You also have the BBMP now claiming that the property is in fact a public property and the local administration should be left free to decide for what purposes should this property be allowed to use. We saw that there were Independence Day celebrations that happened at the Eidgah Maidan, and now the plans of the local administration to conduct Ganesh Chaturthi celebrations. You have Mr. Kapil Sibal, the senior lawyer who is appearing in the matter, and he says that this property should be solely used as a Waqf property and only religious festivals of the certain community, of the Muslim community, should be allowed, barring the national festivals like an Independence Day and Republic Day. Harish continues to be with us on the broadcast. Harish, if we go back to the genesis of this dispute that started between the local corporation and the Waqf Board roughly 2 years ago, could you take us back in time? How exactly did this dispute really start? Because if you hear the argument of Mr. Kapil Sibal, he says that the property is with the Waqf Board for over 100 years.
Well, there is a bit of a technicality here. One, how do you claim a property? You either need to have physical possession of it. In this case, that's not the case. You can see behind me, it's an open ground. The second is you need to have the revenue papers in your name. That's what is called as kata in the local terms. And the Waqf Board hasn't got this kata in its name. Although it refers to earlier court judgments, it refers to an earlier government communication of 1960s, recognizing this as a Waqf property, but at no point in time have they approached the local municipality and got this in their name. It's not in Waqf Board's name. And that's why the BBMP initially tried to claim ownership of this and eventually said this belongs to the Revenue Department. The Revenue Department says that it belongs to us now and has changed the property documents accordingly. And that's why the Waqf Board is in a fix. Many within the community are miffed with the Waqf Board, saying that the board has slept over this issue for a number of decades, did not take physical possession of this, did not get the kata changed to the Waqf Board's name, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why they're losing on this. And Waqf Board's history in terms of maintaining their property is dubious. We've seen many of it being encroached. There's in fact a detailed report of the Assembly committee on how crores of rupees worth Waqf property has been lost to encroachment.
And Harish, to add to the technicality you're mentioning, there's a specific act, the Waqf Board, the Property Act, that lays down that you have to establish possession, use for certain purposes, and then the perhaps property can be deemed to be belonging to the Waqf Board. We also have with us on the broadcast Aditya Srinivasan, who's an advocate with us on the broadcast. Aditya, help our viewers understand that whenever the Waqf Board claims that a certain property, in this case a huge Maidan, a huge ground, you can't really have a possession of it like a mosque, belongs to them, what exactly are the papers that they need to have? If they don't have the papers, then are there any other methods by which in law you can prove that this property belongs to you, say by possession, by use, or any other method? Before I go to my guest, I want to take in some more breaking news which is coming in. These are updates coming in from the Supreme Court. This is the Eidgah Maidan issue before the Supreme Court. Senior advocate Mr. Kapil Sibal is appearing for the Karnataka Waqf Board. Mr. Sibal argues that as far as other activities are concerned, we will allow, but religious activity cannot be allowed. He says, you know what would happen? We can't allow it. That's the word really coming in. As I said earlier, that Mr. Sibal on behalf of the Waqf Board has said that only religious activity of a particular religion, the Muslim religion in this case, is permitted because this is a Waqf property. These are exclusive property rights which are recognized under Indian Constitution, which the community holds. Like the temple trusts you have, similarly you have the Waqf properties. Aditya continues to be with us on the broadcast. He's a lawyer. He'll give us more perspective on the story. Aditya, help our viewers understand what are the special rights and privileges that Islamic Trust enjoys when it comes to the Waqf property. And apart from the papers, are there any other methods through which Waqf can establish that a certain property belongs to them?
Yeah, look, let me start off by saying that I am by no means an expert on the Waqf legislations, or for that matter, Islamic property laws. I can perhaps address this question and a subset of the question that you asked from a logical perspective, and I can try and logically reason it out.
Please go.
In terms of what the law says to establish title, there are a number of ways of doing it, one of which is the papers and documents that you're able to bring to the table and demonstrate your claim to the title. But as you say, there are other things that can also be done, such as demonstrating possession, uninterfered possession for a significant period of time, as a means of showing that you enjoy unfettered access and enjoyment of a certain property. And the presumption that is made under law is that in such cases, anyone else who claims or who could have claimed to have title over the land is simply not bothered about it for such an extensive period of time, and therefore they ought not to be vested with the title to the land. So, I mean, again, as I say, these are general property law principles. There may certainly be certain
exceptions that the specific act really recognizes. Aditya, let's also talk a little more broadly. When the Supreme Court decides on this issue, this is of course an issue as to who has ownership, whether it's the Waqf Board or the local municipal corporation actually has rights to conduct any kind of other religious festivals. We don't know if the Supreme Court is going to decide on the merits in a single hearing. This might take some more time. But when the Supreme Court passes any order today on the Ganesh Chaturthi celebrations, what are the key things they are going to keep in their mind? Law and order, of course, is going to be a huge concern. Will it?
Yes, I mean, so law and order is something that will be on their minds. I don't know that law and order specifically is an issue that gets implicated in the case at hand. So as far as the case at hand is concerned, they will be concerned about the actual merits of the case. Now, I know that certain arguments will be made to suggest, for example, that allowing Waqf properties to be used for another religion's religious ceremonies or religious celebrations may result in a deterioration of law and order. That is something that will have some sort of that may have some sort of impact and impression with the judges as far as their interim orders or interim protections are concerned. But we'll have to see how that plays out.
All right, Aditya and my colleague Harish continue to give us more perspective on this very important story. Getting you some more updates coming in from the Supreme Court. Let's go to that. Now, the Eidgah Maidan issue before the Supreme Court, that hearing is underway by a two-judge bench. Mr. Sibal argues that elections are slated to happen next year. And why this has suddenly happened in the backdrop of elections. The corporation has no title to this. So as we were earlier talking that the corporation has claimed a title to this, the argument of the Waqf Board is that they do not have any kind of title. Harish with us on the broadcast. Harish, give us more perspective on this.
Well, in fact, sometime in July is when the corporation initially claimed that this playground belongs to them, but they then went back and checked the kind of documents that they had, and they realized that they do not have anything to back their claim that this property belongs to the BBMP, the local municipality, or the erstwhile BMP as well. And that's why the BBMP gave up its claim. In fact, at one point in time, they said it probably belongs to the Waqf Board. They then called for any organization having papers for this land to approach the BBMP to show those documents and then say that it belongs to them and get the kata changed. The Waqf Board did not approach the BBMP then. Their claim was that the Supreme Court itself had said it belongs to them in a case earlier, and that should be sufficient. There's no requirement for a kata, and that's perhaps the reason why the Waqf Board is in a soup today, because they do not have the revenue papers, land records in their name. Second, they haven't paid taxes for a number of years. They do not have physical possession of this property, and that gave enough ample opportunity for the revenue department to say that we believe this property belongs to us and then claim ownership of it. And that's how they managed to celebrate Independence Day. There wasn't much opposition to that. But now that groups want to celebrate Ganesh Chaturthi, the government seems to be in a mood to give them permission for that. And there is humongous opposition to that from the Waqf Board and some of the other Islamic organizations that use this ground.
All right, Harish and Aditya are with us on the broadcast. Let's break it down for our viewers. What exactly does Waqf means? Now, Waqf properties are recognized under Indian Constitution. There's a special provision. There are special laws and statutes that have been framed and amended over years. Waqf means permanent dedication by any person of movable and immovable property for any purpose which is recognized by Muslim law. Now, the purpose has to be a pious one. Muslim law has a lot of facets which are exclusive in nature, like the personal laws, laws pertaining to waqf. In many ways, there are exceptions in these laws compared to the ordinary property laws, like Aditya was talking about. Now, waqf is a property which is used for religious and charitable purposes. It is permanently dedicated to the divine. And once a property is dedicated as a waqf property, it is forever. You cannot take it back. The dedication is perpetual, inalienable, irrevocable. So even at the court, the argument of Mr. Kapil Sibal is that if it is established that at some point in 1881, this property was a waqf property, it was recognized by court judgments, that cannot be revoked by any kind of government action. Harish continues to be with us on the broadcast. Harish, I want to talk to you about this facet, what Mr. Kapil Sibal is saying, the electoral point of view. The argument that Mr. Kapil Sibal is making in not so many words is that this entire controversy is being created to communalize the atmosphere because the elections are very close.
Yes, and perhaps one of the reasons why the Waqf Board believes that's the reason is because for the last 6 to 7 years, we've had organizations in Chamarajpet here, the resident groups applying for permission to celebrate Ganesh Chaturthi, and nothing much happened on those requests, either from the police, the state government or the BBMP. None of them acted on those petitions. Why is it that now suddenly these agencies have come up, have got active and have started taking these petitions seriously, and has reached the stage where the Revenue Department says they are about to decide on these petitions and they would be looking at it in a favorable manner? Now, the Waqf Board says it's happening because there are elections slated next year in 2023, anywhere in April and May. And the BJP wants to ensure that there's some sort of a polarization in Bangalore that they gain out of. And also, this area is also not with the BJP. It's currently with the Congress. Zamir Ahmed is the local MLA here, and the Waqf Board and others alleging that the BJP wants to polarize and capitalize on that polarization in the elections, especially in Chamarajpet and areas around it.
I'm also going to take our viewers through to what Mr. Dushyant Dave is saying. He's reading out few judgments of the Supreme Court. He also says that these are unwarranted encroachments on religious structures. The High Court should have not taken this view. And I'm saying this with all humility at my command. That senior advocate, Mr. Dushyant Dave, making arguments before a bench of the Supreme Court. Has Muslim community been allowed to enter a ground owned by Hindu trust? There can be a lot of allegations against each other, but don't indulge into that. That's what the bench is cautioning Mr. Dushyant Dave. Mr. Dushyant Dave, Mr. Kapil Sibal, both are known for their direct style of arguments, and sometimes it does get very tensed in the court as well. Mr. Swapnil Kothari is also joining us on the broadcast. He's a lawyer. Swapnilji, thank you so much for speaking to us. Today we are talking about the Eidgah Maidan and the dispute that pertains to it. There are two facets to it. One, of course, who the title really belongs to, which is at the heart of the dispute. Second, when the court decides that whether the Ganesh Chaturthi celebrations should be allowed or not allowed, what are the key concerns that the court is going to keep in its mind or weigh? Would you like to tell us that are we expecting any kind of order today? Would the court really have the bandwidth to pass any conclusive orders?
Well, it depends upon the length of the arguments. It depends upon the conclusivity of the arguments by both the lawyers. And if I believe in such sensitive matters such as religious issues, when they are at play, especially when the single bench has given an order saying that this can be used only for Independence Day, Republic Day and other Muslim activities, and the High Court has overruled it. And now that it's there before the Supreme Court, obviously I think the Supreme Court should take a little bit of time before coming to any conclusion one way or the other. It's not as to who's arguing the matter, but it's what is being placed before as an argument. Whether the the title is there in dispute, whether the title is not there in dispute, whether there is a continuous celebrations that have taken place so far only of Independence Day and Republic Day, and suddenly now there is a decision to give a Ganesh Chaturthi performance there on those particular ground or whatever it may be. So all of those things will have to be taken into consideration, and especially keeping the right to religion, of course, under Article 25 of the Constitution, the fundamental right to practice, profess and propagate religion is subject to reasonable restrictions, which is one of them is public order. Now, if there is not going to be any public order and there are going to be possibly riots around or anything of that sort, depending upon what the state administration has to say, the Supreme Court will have to take into confidence the the affidavit of the state administration also, if they've asked them to file one, saying that what do you think are going to be the pros and cons of having a Ganesh Chaturthi festival on grounds which have been hitherto used only for Republic Day or Independence Day or Muslim festivities. So this is not something which I as a judge would pass it very easily, especially when it's gone to 2 tiers of the court earlier.
Yeah. Swapnil, would you also want to talk about the Waqf property, and in what ways does the ownership of the Waqf property, the transfer of the Waqf property, if at all is possible, is different from the ordinary property laws governing the country?
Well, it's very different from the ordinary property laws. Waqf properties have their own set of constitution, their own set of objectives, their ideas. It's specifically spelled out. So if there is a certain bar or an embargo on allowing any other religion to practice or some festivals or anything of that sort, I think they need to give permission to that. And if some permission was sought and it was declined, then the Waqf property people are very much within their powers to decline it. But now that the matter has reached the court, the court will not only have to look at the constitution of that Waqf property, what has been going on earlier, what is likely to take place in the future, what, again, I repeat, the pros and cons of riots. That is the main thing. Absolutely. I believe if things are going to pass on smoothly, which I think it should in independent India, but then then it opens up a Pandora's box, saying that by the way, it happened in Karnataka on the Idgah property, in Waqf property, in that particular issue on the 30th of August. This should also happen now on this particular day in this particular property as well. So it's better that the Supreme Court keeps those considerations in mind as well.
Absolutely. Swapnil, please stay with us on the broadcast. I'm going to put out more details. My colleague Ananya Bhatnagar is tracking this hearing at the Supreme Court, and he tells us these are the arguments which are being made by Mr. Dushyant Dave. That has the Muslim community been allowed to enter a ground owned by Hindu trusts? That's what Mr. Dushyant Dave says, and that's when the court really cautions him and says that allegations and counter-allegations can be made on both the sides, but we should not indulge into that and keep the arguments strictly legal. Harish, coming back